I want you to picture something. A hospital waiting room. 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night. I have been sitting in the same plastic chair for 6 hours. There's a cold cup of coffee on the seat beside me, not my seat, I just needed somewhere to put it. Half a granola bar I found at the bottom of my bag, and my phone face up on my knee with 4 missed calls from a number I have not answered. I am not crying, hold on to that. I am not crying, I am just sitting. Very still. The way water goes still right before something heavy drops into it. My name is Nora. I am 34 years old. I run a small publishing press in Edinburgh that I built from nothing. I have a partner I love, a 4-month-old daughter who already has opinions about everything, and a life that from the outside looks like someone who has figured things out. The person in the hospital bed down that corridor, the one I drove 90 minutes through dark roads and rain to reach, is my mother. The same mother who, 3 weeks before this night, stood in my kitchen and said, "I just don't think what you do is a real contribution. Not like what Marcus does." Real contribution. 5 syllables, said the way you'd say the milk is off. As an observation, as fact, in those 4 missed calls on my phone, my brother Marcus, who had been told about the hospital 3.5 hours ago, who lives 22 minutes away, who had not arrived. I am going to tell you everything, because what happened in that waiting room is not the worst of it. What happened before it, across 34 years, that is the part that matters. And what happened after the hospital, after the letter, after the moment I finally and quietly reached the end of something I had been walking toward my whole life, that is the part you are not going to see coming. Don't go anywhere. I grew up in a terraced house in Harrogate, North Yorkshire. The kind of street where everyone keeps their bin lids tidy and has strong opinions about parking. My father, Graham, was a secondary school geography teacher who spent his weekends building flat-pack furniture incorrectly and blaming the instructions. My mother, Margaret, though she preferred Maggie, was a practice manager at a GP surgery. Organized. Efficient. The kind of woman who had strong opinions about the correct way to load a dishwasher and was not afraid to demonstrate them. My brother Marcus was 4 years older than me, and Marcus was, according to every piece of evidence presented to me during my childhood, slightly miraculous. He played football at county level until he was 16. He got 10 GCSE. He studied law at Bristol. He married Gemma, who was pretty and agreeable, and once said, "Oh Maggie, you are so right about everything," at a family dinner. And from that moment, as far as I could tell, Gemma was elevated to the position of second daughter. I drew pictures. I made up stories. I spent 2 summers building a puppet theater in the back garden out of cardboard, bamboo poles, and fabric samples I found at a charity shop. It stood 5 feet tall. I charged the neighborhood children 10 pence to watch performances I had written myself. My mother looked at it once, said, "That's sweet, Nora," and went back inside to help Marcus practice his opening statement for the school mock trial. That is not a metaphor. That is just what happened. I was not the troubled one, not the difficult one, not failing or acting out. I was simply, and this is the most devastating category a child can fall into, fine. Fine children do not require attention. Fine children do not generate concern. Fine children sit at the table and eat their dinner and clap in the right places and quietly learn, without anyone intending to teach them, that asking doesn't really work. By the time I was 12, I had stopped mentioning the puppet shows. By 14, stopped mentioning my writing. By 16, I had developed an efficient internal system. Want something, assess the likelihood of anyone caring, decide it is not worth the energy, do it alone anyway. I got 4 A's at a level. My parents took Marcus and Gemma out to celebrate Marcus's promotion that same week. My results were mentioned briefly, between the starter and main. As a sort of pleasant footnote, "Nora did well too, didn't you, love?" Not a question, a footnote. After university, I moved to Edinburgh, not dramatically, not as a statement. I just had a job there at a small independent publishing house called Bramble and Shore, and Edinburgh was where it was. I was 23. A suitcase, a box of books, and an A to Z that kept falling apart. I worked there for 4 years, reading manuscripts, writing readers' reports, Learning every part of the process from copy editing to cover design to the particular way Alistair, the founder, liked his coffee, strong, no sugar biscuit on the side that he always refused and always eventually ate. I was good at it, not ambitiously good, carefully good. The kind of good that comes from actually caring about the work. I read every submission as if it mattered because I believed it did. At 27, I and two colleagues, Priya and Ross, decided to start our own press. Not a big one, not backed by anyone. A small, deliberate press focused on debut fiction writers who kept getting told their work was too quiet by the larger houses. We called it Third Line Press. Named after a conversation the three of us had in a pub one rainy Thursday, about the idea that the most important sentence in any story is never the first or the last, it is somewhere in the middle. The line no one notices until they read it again. We launched with 4 titles. 2 were reviewed in The Guardian. 1 was longlisted for a prize. The 4th sold quietly and steadily for 2 years because the people who found it told everyone they knew, which is the best kind of selling there is. By 30, Third Line Press was not making anyone rich, but it was paying 3 salaries. It had an office in Leith with a good window and a broken radiator we refused to fix because we had come to think of the cold as part of the atmosphere. I called my mother to tell her about the Guardian review. She said, "That's brilliant, love. Marcus has been asked to lead on a massive merger. I'll tell you about it. It's fascinating." 5 sentences about the review, 12 minutes about the merger. I made a cup of tea, said, "That's great, Mum," and changed the subject to something neutral, which is the conversational equivalent of pulling a ripcord. I told my father separately. Graham listened. Said, "I'm proud of you, Nor." Then added, "Don't mention I said that in front of your mother. She'll think I'm playing favorites." Playing favorites. As if noticing your daughter existed was a controversial position. I met Caleb at a book launch I had organized for one of our authors. He was there because the author was his flatmate's cousin, the kind of 6 degrees of separation Edinburgh specializes in. He was standing near the wine, reading the back of a book from the display table with the focused expression of a man who had actually been absorbed by it rather than performing absorption. I always noticed the difference. I introduced myself. He introduced himself. He asked 3 questions about the press, good questions, not the polite kind, but specific and considered questions about the editorial process, about debut voices, about whether the industry was changing in ways that felt hopeful or just different. Our first date was a walk along the water of Leith, followed by chips from a van he knew about. He had paint on his left hand from a Saturday morning volunteering session where he helped secondary school kids learn basic mural design. He was a structural engineer by profession. The mural thing was just something he did because he liked it. I thought, this is a person who does good things without needing anyone to watch. I was right. We moved in together after 14 months. Bought a flat in Stockbridge 18 months after that, a Victorian conversion with original cornicing, a kitchen that needed everything done to it, and a back garden that had gone fully wild, which I immediately decided was a feature rather than a problem. My parents came to see the flat. Graham shook Caleb's hand warmly and said, "You've got a good one, son." My mother walked through every room making small observations. "This ceiling is quite low and that boiler looks old. Has it been serviced?" And then in my kitchen said, "It's lovely, darling. It's just I suppose I thought publishing would pay better by now." Just, that word. The way British mothers use it like a scalpel, it's just. Caleb was standing in the doorway. He said nothing then. But later, after my parents had left and we were eating pasta at the kitchen table, he put his hand over mine and said, "Your mother is very invested in a version of your life that doesn't exist." I looked at him. "She loves you," he said. "She just doesn't see you." I had never heard it said so simply. I sat with it long after he went to bed. She loves you, she just doesn't see you. Marcus made partner at 36. This was, by any reasonable measure, an achievement worth acknowledging. My mother did not acknowledge it, she celebrated it. There is a difference. The celebration involved a restaurant in Leeds that required a booking 3 months in advance, a speech my father read from a note card, and a custom cake from a Harrogate patisserie that cost. I know the number because I was told it voluntarily, as though it were information I would find meaningful. £220. My mother wore the dress she had been saving for a special occasion. This was the special occasion. Caleb and I drove down, 4 hours on the M1 on a Friday evening in October, through roadworks and a determined rainstorm. I brought wine. Caleb brought a card he had taken 20 minutes choosing because he wanted the tone right, warm but not hollow. My father made his speech. It was 12 minutes long, and it was about Marcus's journey, his discipline, his quiet determination. It was genuinely lovely. At the end, my mother looked around the table and said, "Does anyone want to add anything?" I said I was proud of Marcus. I meant it. Nobody asked how Third Line Press was doing. We had just had our best year. We had signed a 3-book deal with a returning author, the first time we had ever done that, and the advance was real. It felt like something turning. Nobody asked. On the drive home, Caleb said, "Do you want to talk about it?" I said, "Talk about what?" He let it go. I stared at the motorway for 40 minutes thinking, this is just how it is. This is the family I come from. You cannot remodel people the way you remodel a kitchen. You accept the low ceilings or you leave. I had never left. Gemma, Marcus's wife, my mother's adopted daughter, the woman who had said, "Oh Maggie, you are so right about everything," was not a bad person. I want to be fair about that. She was not malicious. She was just strategic. The way some people are strategic without fully knowing that strategy is what they are doing. She knew instinctively how to occupy the warm center of my mother's attention. She brought flowers to visits. She remembered to ask about Mum's garden. She sent photos of the children, Freya, 8, and Thomas, 5, with captions that said things like, "They're asking for grandma already." The children, there are always children in these stories, and they are always innocent. Freya and Thomas were completely innocent. I loved them. I bought them good books and made up stories for them at Christmas, and once spent an entire Boxing Day afternoon making paper puppets with Freya that we then performed to the adults. My mother filmed the performance of Freya, just Freya. I was behind the makeshift curtain in every clip, my hand visible. My voice doing 3 different character voices, but not once in frame. I found this out because Caleb saw the footage on my mother's tablet later and told me quietly, because he believed I deserved to know things even when they were small and painful. Especially then. "You're not in any of them," he said. "She filmed Freya's face the whole time. You can hear you, you can't see you." I said, "She probably just didn't think." He said, "Nora." I said, "I know. I knew." I was 33 when the following things happened within 8 months. First, Third Line Press was approached by a larger publisher, Caldwell and Gray, a well-respected mid-sized house with offices in London and Glasgow, about a partnership. They wanted to bring Third Line under their umbrella, retain me as editorial director, expand the list, give Priya a dedicated nonfiction role, and keep the imprint's identity entirely intact. It was the kind of offer that takes years to arrive. Priya, Ross, and I sat in the cold Leith office for 4 hours with the proposal on the table and said very little. Then we said yes. Second, Caleb was offered a role with a civil engineering consultancy, developing green infrastructure projects across Scotland and northern England. Flood prevention, sustainable drainage, urban ecological corridors. The kind of engineering that makes cities more livable for people who never know they are being helped. He took it. He was proud. I was proud. We went for dinner at the restaurant we had been putting off for a year because it required a reservation. Third, I found out I was pregnant. I was 8 weeks along when I took the test, sitting on the bathroom floor at 7 in the morning because I had not quite made it to standing. I sat there for a while, not crying, just recalibrating. The way you go still after something large and irreversible enters the room. I went downstairs. Caleb was making coffee. I put the test on the kitchen counter. He looked at it, looked at me. His face did the thing it does when something matters. All the surface expressions clear away and you can see straight to the bottom of it. He said, "Hi." I said, "Hi." We held each other in the kitchen for a long time without speaking. That afternoon I called my mother. I sat on the back step of the garden, the wild one I had come to love for exactly that quality, and I dialed. She answered on the second ring. I said, "Mum, I've got some news, 3 pieces actually." I told her about Caldwell and Gray first. She said, "Oh, that's exciting, more job security then." Job security. As if the thing I had built from nothing was primarily a risk management situation now resolved. I told her about Caleb's new role. She said, "That's wonderful, he always seemed very capable." Then I told her about the baby. Silence. Then, "Oh." And this is the part I have replayed more times than I can count, she said, "Oh, darling, I'm going to have to call Gemma. She'll want to know before anyone else. She's been hoping you two would. Well, anyway, that's lovely, Nora. That's really lovely." She rang off in under 4 minutes. Marcus called an hour later. He had already been told by Gemma, who had already been told by my mother. I am still not sure which part of that sequence hurt most. I don't think I need to rank them. Eleanor Ann was born on a Tuesday in March at 4:42 in the morning at the Royal Infirmary of Edinburgh. 7 pounds and 1 ounce. She had Caleb's jaw in my eyes and a very strong opinion already about how she felt about the world. Her opinion in those first hours was that the world was loud and cold, and she was going to make sure everyone knew about it. I thought this was the most perfect quality I had ever witnessed in another human being. Caleb's mum, Janet, arrived that afternoon. She sat in the chair beside the bed and held Eleanor for an hour and said almost nothing. Just held her, like she was something that needed holding and there was nothing else in the world to do. She looked up once and said, "She's going to know exactly what she wants." Then went back to looking at Eleanor. My parents arrived 2 days later. My father held Eleanor carefully and went very quiet in the way men of a certain generation go quiet when something exceeds what they have words for. He handed her back eventually and said, "She's marvelous, Nor, you done good." My mother held Eleanor for 7 minutes, I counted, for reasons I cannot entirely justify, and then said, "She needs burping, I think, here," and handed her back. Then she walked to the window and began talking about Freya's upcoming school play. Caleb from the corner of the room looked at me. A look that said, "I saw that, you don't have to explain it, I didn't explain it." Eleanor was 4 months old when my mother called to say she was coming to stay, not "Can I come or would it be all right coming to stay," a statement of logistics. I thought I'd come up the week after next, give you both a hand. I said, "We're managing all right, Mum." She said, "I know you are. But I haven't seen Eleanor properly since the hospital. I'll come Thursday. I'll get the 10:15 from Leeds." She came Thursday. She told me she was thinking 4 or 5 days. She stayed 11. In those 11 days, she reorganized my kitchen cupboards without asking. She told me twice that I was holding Eleanor too tensely. Every evening she called Marcus from the spare room, and because Victorian ground floor conversions have walls that are not particularly thick, I could hear every word. On day 4, I heard her say, "Nora's doing her best, but you can tell she's still very much finding her feet. Gemma always seemed to just take to it naturally, didn't she?" I was sitting on the landing in the dark, feeding Eleanor when I heard that. I didn't say anything about it to my mother. I just held Eleanor a little closer and told her quietly, "You are the best thing I have ever made, better than any book, better than anything." Eleanor looked up at me with those already knowing eyes and made a small sound I chose to interpret as agreement. Then, on day 9, my mother sat down at my kitchen table over tea and said it. "I just don't think what you do is a real contribution, not like what Marcus does." I set my mug down, I looked at her. I thought about 100 things I could say. I thought about all the years of not saying them. The puppet theater. The graduation photo filed under miscellaneous. The 4-minute call when I announced my pregnancy. I said, "I need to check on Eleanor." And I walked out of the kitchen. On day 11, she went home. She hugged me at the door and said, "It was lovely, darling. You're doing a wonderful job." As if the 11 days had contained none of what they had contained. I stood in the doorway and watched her taxi pull away and felt something shift in my chest. Not anger, not grief, something older and quieter. The feeling of finally seeing clearly something you had been without realizing it, trying not to see. 3 weeks later, Tuesday evening, 9:17 p.m. My father's name on my phone. My mother had collapsed, chest pains. He had called an ambulance. She was at Leeds General. It didn't look serious, the paramedics had said, but they were running tests. I was feeding Alina. I put her down, told Caleb what had happened, kissed Alina's forehead, and got in the car. I texted Marcus, Mum in hospital, Leeds General, Dad's there, then I drove 90 minutes. October. Dark early, rain on the M1. I arrived at 10:30. Found my father in the waiting room. He looked up when I came in and his face did something complicated, relief and something like sadness at the same time. We sat together, got coffee from a machine. I called the ward desk every hour. My father fell asleep around midnight and I watched him sleep and felt a tenderness for him that was not complicated, that had never been complicated. At 11 o'clock I checked my phone. 4 missed calls. Marcus I had not answered. I had texted him twice. Mum is stable. Tests still running. And later, still waiting. Dad's here. Come when you can. At 11:30, Marcus appeared in the waiting room doorway. He was wearing his good coat, navy cashmere, the one he wears to court. He had come from something somewhere. He looked at me, then at my father asleep in the chair, then back at me. How is she? Stable. They think it might be a cardiac arrhythmia. Manageable. They'll know more in the morning. He nodded, sat down, took out his phone and looked at it. I looked at him, at the cashmere coat, at the phone, at the clock on the wall. I had been there for 6 hours, cold coffee, half a granola bar. I had driven 90 minutes in the rain on a Tuesday evening because my mother was in hospital. And Marcus had driven 22 minutes, an hour and a half after I texted him from wherever he had been. I said nothing. I sat in the waiting room next to my brother and stared at the cold cup of coffee on the seat beside me and said absolutely nothing. And that silence, that particular silence, was the beginning of the end of something. At 6 in the morning, my mother was moved to a ward. A cardiologist confirmed the arrhythmia, manageable with medication and lifestyle adjustments. Monitoring needed, but not dangerous. My father held my mother's hand through the whole conversation and nodded at everything the cardiologist said with the focused attention of a man trying very hard to understand and retain it all. My mother, who had apparently decided that near cardiac events were not going to change her fundamental personality, looked at me over my father's shoulder and said, "You didn't need to drive all this way, love. Marcus was just down the road." I looked at her. Marcus, standing near the window, said nothing. My father said, "Nora was here at 10:30, Maggie. She drove through that weather." My mother squeezed his hand and said, "I know, love." And then she looked back at the ceiling and said, "Someone should ring Gemma. She'll want to know." I drove home. I didn't cry on the drive. I had music on, something low and instrumental. The rain had stopped. The motorway was nearly empty at 7 in the morning, that strange, clean emptiness of early roads when the world hasn't quite started yet. I got home at 8:30. Caleb was in the kitchen. Alina was in her bouncy chair, completely absorbed by the mobile above her head. Caleb looked up when I came in. He didn't say how is she or how are you or what happened. He poured me coffee, set it on the table and sat down across from me. I wrapped both hands around the mug. I said, "I was there 6 hours before Marcus arrived." He nodded. She said I didn't need to have come, that he was just down the road. He nodded again. And then she asked someone to ring Gemma. Long pause. "What do you want to do, Nora?" Not "I will fix this." Not "Right, I'll call Marcus." Not "She didn't mean it that way." Just "What do you want to do?" I looked at my coffee, then at Alina, who had found her own hand and was examining it with the concentration of someone making a discovery. I said, "I want to stop pretending this is fine." He said, "Okay. I don't know what that means yet. That's okay too." We sat in the kitchen until Alina demanded attention, which she did with the firm assurance of someone who has decided her time has come. I didn't make a grand announcement. I didn't write a letter or call a family meeting or send a group text. I didn't set a boundary with a capital B the way the internet sometimes describes it, clean, declared, surgical. It was quieter than that, and slower. I simply stopped performing. I stopped calling my mother twice a week and began calling once. When she asked why, "You've barely rung this week, is everything all right?" I said, "Everything's fine, I've just been busy." True, and also a choice. I stopped arriving early to family dinners with carefully selected wine and flowers I had arranged myself. I arrived on time. I brought wine from the co-op. I watched what happened when I stopped over-contributing. What happened was nothing. No one noticed the difference, which told me something. I stopped initiating visits with my parents and let them come to me. My father called every Sunday, reliably. I looked forward to those calls. My mother called when she had something to report, usually about Marcus or Freya or Thomas, and I found I could listen to those calls quite calmly if I wasn't in the same breath waiting to be seen. Caleb watched all of this and said very little. Once he asked, "Are you okay?" I said, "I'm actually a bit better." He nodded, reached over and squeezed my hand once. That was the whole conversation. Priya, who had known me since the Bramble and Shore days and who did not believe in oblique communication, said, "You seem lighter." I thought about it. I stopped trying to earn something I was never going to be given. She said, "Yeah, that'll do it." Easter Sunday. Alina was 9 months old. Caleb and I drove to Harrogate with Alina and a lemon cake I had made from scratch, my grandmother's recipe on the index card, because I like baking, and I was very clear with myself about this. I was not bringing it to be praised. I was bringing it because I wanted lemon cake. Marcus and Gemma were there with Freya and Thomas. The house had that particular Easter Sunday at a family home quality. Too warm, a slightly overcooked roast, someone's glass on the wrong surface, Freya asking questions in the imperious manner of 8-year-olds who know they will be answered. Dinner was fine. I ate my roast. Caleb talked engineering with my father. Alina was passed around and looked at with appropriate reverence, which she tolerated for approximately 7 minutes before making her views known. After dinner, my father washed up with me, just the two of us. He handed me plates to dry and was quiet for a while. Then he said, "You seem well, Nor." "I am," I said. I don't always," he stopped, started again. "I see you, I want you to know that. I'm not always good at saying it." I looked at him, his hands in the washing up water. The same hands that had built flat pack furniture incorrectly and never quite fixed the gate. Hands that were probably never going to change. I said, "I know, Dad. Pass me another plate." "The press is doing well," he said. "I've been reading about it online. That author you signed, I saw her in the paper." "You looked us up. You're my daughter," he said. "Course I did." I nearly cried at that kitchen sink. I did not, but nearly. In the living room, my mother was telling Gemma about a neighbor's extension. Marcus was on his phone. Freya was teaching Thomas a card game he was too young for and explaining the rules with aggressive clarity. I dried the last plate and thought, this is what it is, not a tragedy, not a fairy tale. A family specific and imperfect, full of people who love each other in quantities that don't always match what anyone needs. Some of them see me. Some of them don't. I am done rearranging myself to be seen by the ones who won't. I walked back into the living room, sat next to Caleb, and took Alina from him. Alina looked up at me and made a sound of absolute satisfaction. "There you are," the sound said. "Here I am," I thought back. I did not expect anything more to happen. I had made my quiet adjustments and I was genuinely steadier for it. And then 5 months after Easter, a letter arrived. Handwritten. My mother's handwriting, the neat forward-slanting script of a woman who took a secretarial course in 1981 and never lost the habit of writing properly. Posted from Harrogate. A stamp with a robin on it. I stood in my hallway and looked at it for a moment. Then I went to the kitchen, made tea, put Alina in the high chair with a rice cake, sat down, opened the envelope. "Dear Nora, I have been trying to write this for 3 months. I have been trying to say it out loud for much longer. When you were 4 years old, you built a house out of cardboard boxes in the back garden. You spent an entire Saturday on it. You used my good scissors, which you knew you weren't supposed to, and I was going to tell you off, and then I saw what you'd built and I just stood at the window and watched you. You had made it 2 stories. You had made windows with curtains from a piece of cloth I didn't recognize. You had made a front door that opened and closed on a sellotape hinge. I did not go outside and tell you it was brilliant. I should have. I made you tea and called you in and said wash your hands. I don't know why I didn't say it. I'm not sure I knew then how to say the things that were large. I grew up in a family where things being said made them real and real things were frightening. So I kept the things that mattered very quiet and let the manageable things be loud. Marcus was easier to praise because his achievements had categories. Scores. Rankings. Numbers you could show people. You built things that didn't have scores. And I didn't know how to show people something without a number. That is not an excuse. I know it isn't. In the hospital, when you had been there 6 hours and I told you that you didn't need to come, I saw your face. I knew exactly what I had done. I said it anyway because I have spent 34 years saying the manageable thing instead of the true thing, and it is a very hard habit to stop. The true thing is this. You are the one I think about when I think about what I got right. Not because you needed less, you needed exactly as much, I just gave you less, and that is mine to carry, but because what you built without me and in spite of me. And I know that, I know exactly that. Third line press, the flat, the leaner. The way you are with people, you got there without anyone building a stage for you, and I have not said it, but I am saying it now. I am astonished by you. Nora, I always was, I'm sorry it took me this long. Love, Mum. I read it once, put it down, drank my tea, watched Alina eat her rice cake with the methodical focus of someone who takes her work seriously. Read it again. I folded it carefully, placed it in the kitchen table drawer, the one where I keep the good things. Alina's first hospital photograph. The card Caleb gave me when Third Line signed its first returning author. My grandmother's lemon cake recipe on the index card. I didn't call my mother. I didn't reply that day. I sat for a while. Then I picked up Alina and took her into the garden, the wild one, the one that had gone fully its own way and that I loved for exactly that. And I sat on the old bench in the October afternoon light and held my daughter and breathed. There is a particular quality of forgiveness that does not announce itself. It doesn't arrive with resolution or with the right words or with any kind of scene. It arrives the way dawn does, not as a single moment, but as a slow, accumulating change in the light. You don't see it happen. You look up and it has happened. I looked up. The garden was turning. The leaves on the back tree were going that deep amber. There were late flowers still holding on something purple. I had forgotten what I planted there. Alina was warm and real and present in my arms. I did not forgive everything. I did not undo anything. I did not rearrange the past into something more comfortable. I just sat in the garden with my daughter and felt for the first time in a long time that the account I had been running in my head did not need to keep running, that some things can settle, the way soil settles, not resolving into something perfect, just finding its level. I went inside. I wrote a reply. 6 words. Thank you, Mum. I know I am 35 now. Alina is 14 months old, walking furiously into everything. Third Line Press has 15 authors on the list. One was shortlisted for a major award this year. I found out on a Thursday afternoon and called Caleb and Priya and my father in that order. All 3 of them said things that mattered. My father drives up to Edinburgh twice a year. He and Caleb have developed a friendship built on mutual respect and a shared love of terrible television, which they watch together on the sofa with the focused enjoyment of men who have found something simple and have decided not to complicate it. My mother visits. It is different now. There are still moments, there will probably always be moments where something is said and it lands the old way, finds the old bruise. But the bruise is smaller than it was. And I no longer press on it the way I used to, checking to see if it still hurts, as if pain were proof that something mattered. It mattered. It is over. Both things can be true. Marcus is Marcus. He called on my birthday this year, left a voicemail, said happy birthday, said the kids were well, said we should get together sometime. He meant it the way people mean things when they mean them but don't do them. I listened to the voicemail, saved it, moved on. Gemma sends Christmas cards with a family photo. This year's showed Freya and Thomas in matching jumpers. I put it on the fridge. Because Freya and Thomas are good kids, and the jumpers were genuinely excellent. Caleb's mum Janet came for a long weekend in November. We made soup together on Saturday morning and talked for 3 hours. At one point she said, "You know what I love about you?" I said, "Tell me." She said, "You know exactly what you've built. You never need me to tell you, but you let me tell you anyway." I thought about that for a long time after. I thought about the cardboard house in the garden, the puppet theater at 10 pence a show, the cold office in Leith where we started a press with a broken radiator we refused to fix. I thought about standing in a hospital waiting room at 6 hours in, cold coffee, hearing my mother say he was just down the road, and the feeling in the car driving home. The feeling of something ending. Endings are not always the worst thing. Sometimes what ends was the thing that needed to end, so that what remained could breathe. What remained in my case? A daughter who looks at the world with the full, sovereign confidence of someone who knows she is completely expected. A partner who does not see me as a problem to be managed or an absence to be explained. Who simply sees me. A business I made with my own hands from my own mind that puts unheard voices into the hands of people who were looking for them without knowing it. A father who looked things up online. A mother who wrote 6 words that took 34 years to arrive, and who signed them finally, love. And a garden, wild and slightly overgrown and entirely mine, where in October the light does something particular in the late afternoons. Low and amber and patient. Where I sometimes sit on the old bench with a leaner in my arms and feel the specific peace of a woman who stopped waiting to be seen and started simply being. That is enough. That is, it turns out, quite a lot. If this stayed with you, the waiting room, the cardboard house, the letter with the robin stamp, hit subscribe and don't go anywhere. Because next week on Her Breaking Point, I am bringing you the story of a woman who found out at her own birthday dinner that her family had been keeping a secret from her for 11 years. It starts with a toast, and it ends somewhere none of them expected. See you there.